Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to day 6 of our read aloud. We haven't started the book, but we are today. We are reading Number of the Stars by Lewis Lowry. This is a Newbery Medal book, so this is going to be really good. This is one of my favorite books, and I'm glad that you guys picked it and that we get to read it together. Now, you don't have to buy the book. Um, you can just listen along because right now I don't think that you can buy any books. I've tried and I can't find any unless you have a Kindle. So you do not have to get the book, you just get to listen. So before we start the book, I'm going to give you some more background knowledge. If you haven't watched the videos, this is a story. It's historical fiction. It's based on history, but it's not true, but it could be true. It's similar to the read aloud that you did. I can't remember what it was called. Star of Light, Star of something. I can't remember what it was, but it was about two girls, and this is similar to that story as well. So the setting of the story is in Denmark. In 1943 during World War II. Now, you will notice throughout your brain pops and vocabularies that you watched. World War I, after that, Adolf Hitler, was mad because Germany lost all kinds of money and they lost the war. So, to kind of retaliate, he's a dictator. We learned about that type of government, dictatorship, where he kind of rules the roost. He is going to take over and kind of brainwash his people into thinking that Jewish people were the worst race. And he wanted to get rid of the Jewish people. So Germany has invaded land around them. And now he's going to Denmark, where this story is based off of. And now the Jewish people are going through the Danish resistance, which means they are going to they're going to go into hiding so they won't be captured or arrested or taken by the Germans to concentration camps where they were killed or they were made to work and starve to death. It was awful. So this story is about two little girls. Um, During that time, Adolf Hitler I'm trying to look at my notes, was the leader of the Nazis. And they wore, I kind of have a hard time pronouncing it, swastikas. That was their symbol that looked like this. And then the Jewish people would wear the Star of David, which was a yellow star. Even their businesses had to have like Jews on their signs so people would know. And then eventually they would have to sell it to non-Jewish people. So the Germans are coming into their town, and you'll notice on chapter 1 when we start reading that they're everywhere. The soldiers are controlling their streets. Let's see. So to summarize, this is what we call the Holocaust, which means complete destruction by fire. That's what in the late 1950s, that was what we refer to it as now. 6 million Jews were killed during this time. And today we honor them in history, in museums, and in books. So I'm going to read by Lewis Lowry, Number of the Stars. And I'll read the back of it too. 10-year-old Anne-Marie Johansen and her best friend Ellen Rosen often think about life before the war. But it's now 1943 and their life in Copenhagen is filled with school, food shortages, and the Nazi soldiers marching in their town. The Nazis won't stop. The Nazis are the Germans. Those are the Adolf Hitler's soldiers. They won't stop. The Jews of Denmark are being relocated, so Ellen moves in with the Johansens and pretends to be a part of their family. Then Anne-Marie is asked to go on a dangerous mission Somehow she must find the strength and courage to save her best friend's life. There's no turning back now. So this story is kind of like Anne Frank's story that you learned about on the United streaming video. So chapter 1, why are you running? I'll race you to the corner, Ellen. Anne-Marie adjusted the thick leather pack on her back so that her school books balanced evenly. Ready? She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. No, she said, laughing. You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk like civilized people? She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. Come on, Ellen. Anne-Marie pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner of the Copenhagen street. Please. Now, Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark. Ellen hesitated, then nodded and shifted her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. Oh, all right. Ready? She said. Now, a rucksack, if I use my context clues, she put it over her shoulder and she had books in it. So that is a backpack. Go, shouted Anne-Marie, and the two girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne-Marie's silvery blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. Wait for me, wailed little Kirsty, left behind out. But the two other girls weren't listening. Anne-Marie outdistanced her friend quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied as she sped along the street called Austerbrogade, past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood here in the northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted. An elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made a string. A young woman pushing a baby in a carriage moved aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. Anne-Marie looked up, panting. Just as she reached the corner, her laughter stopped. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. Halt! The soldier ordered in a stern voice. The German word was as familiar as it was frightening. Anne-Marie had heard it often enough before, but it had never been directed at her until now. Behind her, Ellen also slowed and stopped. Far back, little Kirsty was plodding along, her face in a pout because the girls hadn't waited for her. Anne-Marie stared up. There were two of them. That meant two helmets, two sets of cold eyes glaring at her, and four tall, shiny boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, blocking her path to home. And it meant two rifles gripped in the hands of the soldiers. She stared at the rifles first. Then, finally, she looked into the face of the soldier who had ordered her to halt. Why are you running? The harsh voice asked. His Danish was very poor. Now, the Danish is the language of the Denmark people. 3 years, Anne-Marie thought with contempt. 3 years they've been in our country, and still they can't speak our language. I was racing with my friend, she answered politely. We have races at school every Friday, and I want to do well, so I... Her voice trailed away, the sentence unfinished. Don't talk so much, she told herself. Just answer them, that's all. She glanced back. Ellen was motionless on the sidewalk. A few yards behind her, farther back, Kirsty was still sulking and walking slowly toward the corner. Nearby, a woman had come to the doorway of a shop and was standing silently watching. One of the soldiers, the taller one, moved toward her. Anne-Marie recognized him as the one she and Ellen always called in whispers, the giraffe, because of his height and the long neck has extended from his stiff collar. He and his partner were always on this corner. He prodded the corner of her backpack with the stock of his rifle, and that's a gun. Anne-Marie trembled. What is in here? He asked loudly. Oh, what is in here? He asked loudly. From the corner of her eye, she saw the shoekeeper move quietly back into the shadows of the doorway out of sight. School books, she answered truthfully. Are you a good student? The soldier asked. He seemed to be sneering. Yes. What is your name? Anne-Marie Johansson. Your friend, is she a good student too? He was looking behind her at Ellen, who hadn't moved. Anne-Marie looked back too and saw that Ellen's face, usually rosy-cheeked, was pale, and her dark eyes were wide. She nodded at the soldiers. "Better than me," she said. "What is her name?" "Ellen." "And who is this?" he asked, looking to Anne-Marie's side. Kirsty had appeared there suddenly, scolding at everyone. "My little sister." She reached down for Kirsty's hand, but Kirsty, always stubborn, refused it and put her hands on her hips defiantly. The soldier reached down and stroked her little sister's short, tangled curls. "Stand still, Kirsty," Anne-Marie ordered silently, praying that somehow the obstinate 5-year-old would receive the message. But Kirsty reached up and pushed the soldier's hand away. "Don't," she said loudly. Both soldiers began to laugh. They spoke to each other in rapid German that Anne-Marie couldn't understand. "She is pretty like my own little girl," the tall one said in a more pleasant voice. Anne-Marie tried to smile politely. "Go home, all of you. Go study your school books, and don't run. You look like hoodlums when you run." The two soldiers turned away. Quickly, Anne-Marie reached down again and grabbed her sister's hands before Kirsty could resist. Hurrying the little girl along, she rounded the corner. In a moment, Ellen was beside her. They walked quickly, not speaking, with Kirsty between them, toward the large apartment building where both families lived. When they were almost home, Ellen whispered suddenly, "I was so scared." "Me too," Anne-Marie whispered back. As they turned to enter their building, both girls looked straight ahead toward the door. They did it purposely so that they would not catch the eyes or attention of two more soldiers who stood with their guns on this corner as well. Kirsty scurried ahead of them through the door, chattering about the pictures she was bringing home from kindergarten to show Mama. For Kirsty, the soldiers were simply part of the landscape, something that had always been there on every corner, as unimportant as lampposts throughout her remembered life. "Are you going to tell your mother?" Ellen asked Anne-Marie as they trudged together up the stairs. "I'm not. My mother would be upset." "No, I won't either. Mama would probably scold me for running on the street." She said goodbye to Ellen on the second floor, where Ellen lived, and continued on to the third, practicing in her mind a cheerful greeting for her mother, a smile, a description of today's spelling test in which she had done well. But she was too late. Kirsty had gotten there first. "And he poked Anne-Marie's book bag with his gun, and then he grabbed my hair." Kirsty was chattering as she took off her sweater in the center of the apartment living room. "But I wasn't scared. Anne-Marie was, and Ellen too, but not me." Miss Johansson rose quickly from the chair by the window where she'd been sitting. Miss Rosen, Ellen's mother, was there too, in the opposite chair. They'd been having coffee together, as they did many afternoons. Of course, it wasn't really coffee, though the mothers still called it that, having coffee. There had been no real coffee in Copenhagen since the beginning of the Nazi occupation, not even any real tea. The mothers sipped at hot water flavored with herbs. "Anne-Marie, what happened? What is Kirsty talking about?" her mother said anxiously. "Where's Ellen?" Miss Rosen had a frightened look. "Ellen's in your apartment. She didn't realize you were here." Anne-Marie explained. "Don't worry, it wasn't anything. It was the two soldiers who stand on the corner of Arston Brigade. You've seen them. You know the tall one with the long neck, the one who looks like a silly giraffe?" She told her mother and Miss Rosen of the incident, trying to make it sound humorous and unimportant, but their uneasy looks didn't change. "I slapped his hand and shouted at him," Kirsten announced importantly. "No, she didn't, Mama." Anne-Marie reassured her mother. "She's exaggerating, as she always does." Miss Johansson moved to the window and looked down to the street below. The Copenhagen neighborhood was quiet. It looked the same as always, people coming and going from the shops, children at play, the soldiers on the corner. She spoke in a low voice to Ellen's mother. "They must be edgy because of the latest resistance incidents. Did you read in Die Freie Dansk about the bombings in Hillerød and Nørrebro?" Although she pretended to be absorbed in unpacking her school books, Anne-Marie listened, and she knew what her mother was referring to. Dr. Freie Dansk, the Free Danes, was an illegal newspaper. That means it was not legal, so it They had to keep it secret. Peter Nelson brought it to them occasionally, carefully folding and hidden among ordinary books and papers. And Mama always burned it after she and Papa had read it. But Anne Marie heard Mama and Papa talk, sometimes at night, about the news they received that way, news of sabotage against the Nazis, bombs hidden and exploded in the factories that produced war materials, and industrial railroad lines damaged so that the goods couldn't be transported. And she knew what resistance meant. Papa had explained when she overheard the word and asked. The resistance fighters were Danish people. No one knew who because they were very secret, kind of like the Underground Railroad, where they would hide slaves so they could escape freedom and go to the north. So this is similar to that. But because they were very secret, who were determined to bring harm to the Nazis however they could. They damaged the German trucks and cars and bombed their factories. They were very brave. Sometimes they were caught and killed. I must go and speak to Ellen, Miss Rosen said, moving toward the door. You girls walk a different way to school tomorrow. Promise me, Anne Marie and Ellen will promise too. We will, Miss Rosen, but what does it matter? There are German soldiers on every corner. They will remember your faces, Miss Rosen said, turning in the doorway to the hall. It is important to be one of the crowd, always. Be one of many. Be sure that they never have reasons to remember your face. She disappeared into the hall and closed the door behind her. He'll remember my face, Mama, Kirsty announced happily, because he said I looked like his little girl. He said I was pretty. If he has such a pretty little girl, why doesn't he go back to go be her good father? Miss Johansson murmured, stroking Kirsty's cheek. Why doesn't he go back to his own country? Mama, is there anything to eat? Anne Marie asked, hoping to take her mother's mind away from the soldiers. Take some bread and give a piece to your sister. With butter? Kirsty asked hopefully. No butter, her mother replied. You know that. Kirsty sighed as Anne Marie went to the bread box in the kitchen. I wish I could have a cupcake, she said, a big yellow cupcake with pink frosting. Her mother laughed. For a little girl, you have a long memory. She told Kirsty. There hasn't been any butter or sugar or cupcakes for a long time, a year at least. When will there be cupcakes again? When the war ends, Miss Johansson said. She glanced through the window, down to the street corner where the soldiers stood, their faces impassive beneath the metal helmets. When the soldiers leave. All right, so that was chapter 1. I want you to ask yourself, does this remind you of what we're going through right now? Their food is they have a shortage of food right now. They have soldiers guarding everything. People are they're passing away. Does this remind you of what we're going through now in our pandemic? Like sometimes when we go to the grocery, we can't have meat, or we can't get chicken or pork chops. So it kind of reminds me of what we're going through. So that was chapter 1. And then the virus is kind of like harming people. So it's kind of similar. So that was chapter 1, and we will go on to chapter 2 tomorrow. So hope you guys enjoy it so far. Bye, guys. We miss you.